that drives my presentation today and will drive our discussion. Now, fast backwards. We're back in Germany again. This is 1914. If any of you are not familiar with this fellow, Duncan Forrester, he's a Scottish theologian, public theologian of the highest caliber. I encourage you to, if you're into theology or if you're not, to read him and pick up this last book that he wrote. He died just a few years ago. So this is a little known story, but he opens the book with this. Many of you may be familiar with the fact, if not, it happened on both sides. It happened in Britain as well. The First World War was sold and conceived of by both sides as a holy war, as a war for the soul and the spirit of their country, a war that was ordained and supported by God. You know, the Nazis wore, the German soldiers in World War II wore this belt buckle, Gott mit uns, God is with us. It was absolutely the spirit of the First World War. And this manifesto came out. Now, it's a well-known story that the churches rushed to the embrace of National Socialism in the 30s, but it happened in the first decade, or the second decade of the 20th century as well. And Barth, who I think at that point was still working in Germany before he escaped to Switzerland, was appalled by this document that came out. The theologians supported the war, and as Barth wrote, theology was under orders, as it were, to act as the ideological wing of the state. This changed everything for him. It was like a road to Damascus moment. He suddenly realized what had happened to the church, what had happened to theology, and who knows what was going on in his mind at the time. I haven't read a whole lot of Karl Barth. But maybe he went back to the beginnings of the church and said, you know, this has been going on for 2,000 years, since Constantine, since the church threw in with the Roman Empire and said, we're going to be in power with you. And that indeed is what happened. And the church is absolutely responsible for almost really conflated with Western civilization. White supremacist, Eurocentric, colonialist Western civilization. And he came to the conclusion that a new and different kind of theological beginning must now be made. It was called neo-orthodoxy. He said, we've got to get back to God, and we've got to get back to Jesus. And he was absolutely right. Now, why are we talking about this? You know, this was billed as to being about churches, and it's been my song that I've been singing since I began this work 20 years ago, my work with Kairos and with Palestinian Christians, that the churches have a crucial, perhaps indispensable role to play in the movement, that the churches have done it before. If you talk about the civil rights movement, if you talk about the anti-apartheid movement, you've heard me say this over and over again. It's time for the churches to stand up and do what they've done before, to be the leading edge and to bring along the politics and to bring along the grassroots and to lead society toward, you know, the kingdom, if you want to speak in the Christian theological terms. But I want to return to the point that I just made, which is, and that I've been coming to this more and more over the past years. It's not just about the churches. It can't be just the churches, and we're going to get to that, I hope, when we talk about what's for the movement today. It can't be the churches alone, but also whatever is happening in the churches and in our white supremacist, white Christian dominated world, which is becoming more and more dominated by Christian nationalism rather than the gospel, which was a grassroots blueprint for resistance and sedition against empire. Whatever we can say about, and whatever is true of the churches as an institution, or of Christianity as a theology or as an ideology, is true for Western civilization. It's true for what's going on in our political systems in our world. And so if we go back to Barth again, it has to be transformed. It has to reclaim the original intent. And so we're not just talking about the churches. We're talking about who we are as a society. We're talking about civilization and humanity as a whole. Trump's re-election shines a bright light on our settler colonial DNA. America's unconditional support has been an expression of this. I recently read, and so it's a theological battleground. When we talk about doing theology, it's a misnomer. It's a very misleading term. Theology, if you look at the Greek, means the study of, right? Whatever the ology part, the study of God. It's not the study of God. God is not something to be studied. God, however one conceives of God or divinity, is something that is experienced very individually and communally in a different way. And it has to do with how we are called, if you want to use that expression, what we are called to do in our human relationship. It's about human affairs. And if you take a look at the great texts of any sort of faith tradition, if you want to call it that, that's what it's about. How do you live? How do you relate to creation, to your fellow creatures in this life and on this planet? So that's what theology is, and that's, I suppose, is what made me become a theologian. I mean, I started off as a psychologist. Being a theologian gets me, I think, a lot closer to what I really want to be doing, and has nothing to do with being in a seminary or serving as a rabbi or an imam or a priest or a pastor. Okay, gotta keep moving. I think we talked about Césaire last time as well. And I just want to mention it again, and again draw your attention to this wonderful piece by Nora Ericott that came out a month or two ago, where she actually talked about this on Democracy Now!, but then she published a piece, and this is the link to it, and I think Tom sent it to you as well. It's this idea of the boomerang. And with Césaire, and of course, his context was, post World War II, very, very much in the sort of the post-colonial ferment that was going on in the world. He was from the Caribbean. He lived in France for a while. He was influenced by Sartre. He was I think he taught Fanon. And of course, he was Black. And it was all about colonialism for him. You should read this book. It's very short. You can get it for like $5 on 8 books. And it's quite amazing. I think we started last time, just with reading a section of it on the screen. Whatever you're doing out there to your colonial subjects or to colonial objects, it's an expression of who you are in your metropole, in your own society, and it comes back at you. And if that's ever been true, I think we can see it now as Americans. And I'm not just talking about Palestine. I'm not just talking about the genocide that we are committing and allowing and enabling and encouraging. It's about the whole neoliberal order, where the whole world is a colonial marketplace for us. It's a colonial arena. And everything that we're doing, whether it's making deals with the Saudis um, or promoting economic policies, uh, that that's what it's about. And Trump has finally ripped the veil off. It's all the art of the deal. Okay, so um, let's pivot now to get to talking about what's happening here. If we want to understand and talk about, quote, the churches or theology as kind of a major moving part of this thing that we call the movement for the liberation of Palestine, the pro-Palestinian movement. We've got to talk about Christian-Jewish relations. There's not much time for me to talk about this today. I won't barely talk about it at all, but I'm thinking about it a lot and starting to write about it. From the beginning, Jews and Judaism itself has been kind of an object of projection for the nascent church and this new faith, which eventually called itself Christianity, which started off as a Jewish sect, and how Christians saw Jews. I mean, initially it was, once the separation had happened, they threw the Jews under the bus and said, "We're with Rome," and the Jews retreated into their own insularity and put their wagons in a circle. We've still got them in a circle. We're still building a fortress around ourselves. And Christianity said, we're going to take over the world. We're going to become colonial. We're going to become imperial. We're going to convert everybody. Everybody has to become Christian if you want to be in our club. And it was absolutely a power move. And unfortunately, it worked. And the history, one way to look at church history is as a church struggle between what happened to it and its origins. Again, as a grassroots movement against occupation and empire and imperial supremacy. It's always been that struggle, and I think we can see that continuing today. So, we're going to talk about Project Esther, and it's all about anti-Semitism, but it didn't start with the Heritage Foundation in whatever it was, 2023, when they cooked this thing up in 2024. New anti-Semitism is a term that was invented in the 70s. I'm going to quote you from a publication that was published by the Anti-Defamation League, but it really was part of the neoconservative movement that was really rising up in those days and forming itself as a reaction against what it perceived as a threat from the left. So this is going to sound familiar to you if you've read Project Esther and you've been following what's obviously having to avoid it. If you've been following what's been happening with this hysterical explosion about the weaponization of anti-Semitism, using it as a way to promote the far-right agenda, okay? These are all quotes from this book. The very first line of the book is the post-World War II honeymoon with the Jews over? Now, the context for that is that after World War II, confronted with the horror of the genocide of the Jews of Europe, again, it started in Germany, it spread west to the United States very, very quickly. And horror, appropriate horror and shame, and recognition of the fact that this was done by the white Christian Western world. It could not have happened. Hitler could not, it was, all he had to do was use what was available to him in terms of the deep anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism that was hiding in plain sight in Western civilization. And he was able to accomplish what he needed to accomplish. there was a reaction to this. And the reaction was to say, oh my God, this is our fault. We're really bad. We hated the Jews. We threw them under the bus. We have to reverse that. We're going to restore the Jews and restore doctrinally for us as Christians the idea that the Abrahamic covenant is in force, that the Jews are God's chosen people, favored and most beloved by God. Short story is there was a slippery slope to endorsing political Zionism. At the same time, this happened again mid-century, but it was already in progress. And the rest is history in terms of the West's endorsement of political Zionism and of the state of Israel, buying all of the mythology about what Israel is, all the false history, all the latent racism, and colonialism. That was the honeymoon, and it was a honeymoon for these guys. They loved that because Zionism is colonialism. Endorsing the settler colonial Zionist project puts us in our own comfort zone. It's our own settler colonial DNA. What's so hard to understand about this? That's why we love Israel, because it fits like a glove with what has now become clear as the dominant agenda of the United States, sweeping aside everything else that could be good about or the potential of the United States as a democracy. All the things that we've achieved, all the things we still have to continue to fight for if we're going to rescue our country from this horror. But no blue sky between us and Israel it is very much a part of what's happening. So that was the honeymoon. And all of a sudden, in the 70s, people were starting to raise questions about Israel. At the same time as the right was feeling an assault from the left. Again, this was the 70s, a long time ago. We were still in the New Deal. There was all this progressivism that was still part of our of what was happening in this country. They didn't like it. It didn't fit with the war plan. It didn't fit with economic neoliberal colonialism. Okay. So you read this language, it's a little bit like reading, Project Esther is a little smoother. This stuff is raw. You just take a look at radical left, capital R, capital L. It's an evil. And it is associated with the evil of communism. And it represents a danger to the world, not just to Jews. So again, we're going to protect the Jews, but really what we're doing is we're protecting our own butts. We're protecting our own political and ideological interests. And we are using the Jews. And this is the ADL, so they're speaking as Jews. But they're saying, we're not just worried about Jews. We're worried about America and preserving American values. Right? Sound familiar? This is 50 years ago, folks. And then we go on. And I just thought I'd pull this out there. I thought this was really interesting. Because again, what we're seeing now is a reassertion in the face of, my God, what you can see on the news, in the face of that, a reassertion of the fact that, no, don't forget who the good guys are here. The good guys are the white European Israelis who are fighting the dark brown forces of terrorism. Do not make the mistake of thinking of Hamas as a liberation movement or as resistance. Do not make that mistake. They were doing this 50 years ago. They were seeing the same threat. That was the quote, new anti-Semitism. And now it has come back. It's roaring back today. I want to emphasize this because for me, it feels like this is the context in which we need to be thinking about where we're going and what it is that we're up against here. Because Otherwise, it kind of looks like we're losing, right, folks? What do we do with that? And to get back to Bonhoeffer's question, can we be of any use? And if so, how? And to quote the rabbis, if not now, when? No, it's now. Okay, let's dig into Project Esther. This is, I hope you've had a chance to read it. Maybe you haven't. Go back and read it. You can read the JVP article, which is a nice summary of it, but just dip into it. It's not that long. It's like a, I don't know, 25-page PDF. It's written for popular consumption. The historic Jewish home. Of course, we know that Esther really existed. Of course, we know that that story really happened, right? It's the Bible, right? It's the inner word of God. Fine. It's a story. It's a myth. And it's a pretty horrible story in a way, because the part that is usually elided, that is not talked about, is that because of the machinations of this mythical Jewish heroine whose uncle was Mordecai, um, um, who wormed his way into the king's favor and then uh, pimped his adopted daughter to 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 become one of the chief occupant of the king's harem. Um, they just they foiled the plot to genocide the Jews of Persia and turned it around and genocided the non-Jews of Persia. Great story. Anyway, that's the blueprint. But they're elevating her to be a heroine to save the Jews. It's brilliant marketing. They go straight to the Bible. It's brilliant. Again, I'm quoting from Project Esther. I don't know if you're seeing this on the screen. If I get rid of this thumbnail here or move it around. Okay. Okay. I kid you not. In case you weren't aware of this, there's something called the Global Hamas Support Network, the HSN. Remember that? It exists, it's real, and it's got its tentacles everywhere. And it's controlling our society. It's going to eat it up like a cancer. Okay? I'm thinking about what Hitler did in the beginning when he said, there's an international Jewish conspiracy, and the Jews have their fingers in everything. There's a famous graphic where this horrible caricature of a Jew with the hook nose and everything. It's got their bloody hands grasping the globe. Same playbook. Now it's the Hamas Support Network. And it's not just anti-Israel and anti-Zionist. Bad enough. It's anti-American, folks. And pro-Palestinian movement is in quotes. Um, Now, one of the important words here is it's not just the activists, folks. It's the funders. They know what they're doing. They're going to go after the funders, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Dedicated to the destruction of capitalism and democracy, all that's good in the world, and it's supporting our enemies, domestic and foreign. It's bad. We have to defeat it for the sake of our country. And Esther and God is with us. And talking to you Jews, but also to everybody, do not be complacent about this. And do not, you JVPers and their supporters, get sucked into believing that you're working for good for the Palestinians, because you're not. You're working for Hamas, and they want to destroy us. Why am I? Here we go. Again, they're talking about financial support. Okay, great. Perfect. I don't understand why I have trouble advancing this. There we go. Okay. Um, I just pulled this out of the, again, this is right out of Project Esther. Um, and they start to list. For some reason, they put AMP at the top. Maybe they figured that would play better because it's got the M word, right? It's radical Islam, etc. And they are behind SJP. They're behind what's happening on campuses. They've sucked the Jews in, the radical young Jews, um, and the academy. They spent a lot of ink on the academy, and again, it's really smart. If you've captured the academy, you're gone. That's what happened in 1933. That's what happened in apartheid South Africa. The universities were absolutely on board. They were a vehicle, they were a method, they supported it all. And if not, you were gone. That's that's what's so dangerous and scary to me about what's been happening here with with the current administration and with the academy. That's why fighting back against that is so important. So they have to make common cause with students on campus, get those faculty involved. I don't think there's a much more important arena to be operating in. Put the academy right next to the churches. I think if you take a look at Harvard and a couple of other schools that are not doing the Columbia thing, um, I'm much more encouraged by that than what I see as the silence and complacency and the stuckness of the institutional churches. I mean, don't even get me started about the synagogues. We Jews are so dug in. It breaks my heart. But all the people of my heart and how are the people in the churches that I've been working with. And I mean, I'll just mention it now. If you take a look, and this is 20 years worth of work, you take a look at the resolutions that have been passed at the top of the house in the major denominations and also the smaller peace churches. But we're talking about the Episcopalians, the Presbyterians, the UCC, Lutherans maybe someday, never mind the Diocesan Catholic Church, but the big, what they call tall steeple Protestant denominations in the United States, they've passed all the resolutions. They've gotten them through. After 20 years of work, little by little, chipping away at the wall. Israel is apartheid. Christian Zionism is bad. Support BDS. BDS. But if you talk to any pastor or Episcopal priest anywhere in the United States and say, do you know what your denomination's official policy is about Israel and Palestine? They won't know. They won't preach on it. And if you talk to people in the pews, they don't know. It hasn't gotten there. It's not happening to the great. Something about the strategy has not worked. And the churches are enlightened, courageous church university administrators to speak up. Because I see that it may be, realizing this, those people in the academy see that their mission and their livelihood is threatened. I think churches are complacent. I think Sunday morning is about keeping people comfortable. It's not about preaching from the pulpits. Now, you wonder then what happened with the civil rights movement? Why was that different? Good question. And then take a look at this last bullet. They're naming names. We're talking about open society. That's Soros's thing. Tides, which I wasn't aware of. It's also very big. Funds a lot of progressive causes. They're going to cut them off. That's their plan. They can probably do it in various ways, or they're going to try. It's a good strategy. You choke off the funding. I mean, they're doing it. USAID is gone. It's the only good thing that we were doing in the world. If you think about the influence of the United States in the world, and it was not I mean, I worked for some of it. I worked for USAID as a consultant for a while, and some of the other big NGOs that were doing humanitarian and development work around the world. Very, very, very dysfunctional in some ways, but it was doing good. It's gone. Think about it. Okay, now, here's the thing. Here's why Project Esther is important. They've given us their playbook. It can be our playbook. So these slides break all the rules, I know, but hold on to these, and we can bring them back later if you want to refer back to them. I'll put them back up on the screen. HSO, by the way, means Hamas support organizations. So there is the Hamas support network, and then remember this one. There's some Hamas support organizations, which are part of the broader network that are being supported and courted by the Hamas support network. And they're doing propaganda throughout the U.S. educational system. They have to control that. That's in place. Cut off the funding, block access to Congress. I'm sure they could huddle with the AIPAC folks and they'll tell them how to do that. Etc. So this is good organizing from a high level, connected to the seats and the sources of real power and money. Then they talk about their methods. Here's the playbook. Okay, go after the money, cut it off. Build your coalition base. Weaponize antisemitism. So you start off by branding them as anti-Semitic. As soon as you do that, you have, you've created division within the organizations that are trying to work together within those coalitions. You've branded them, and it's dividing and conquer, and you're delegitimizing them. It's a very, very important piece of strategy, in my opinion, and we need to remember it. Again, it's a real focus here on coalition, and I think we really need to be thinking about coalition a lot. I think one of the main that I've experienced in our movement, and I'd be interested in what people think about this, is that we're still relatively siloed. I don't think there's enough effort put into coalition building. I mean, I've seen it with some organizations. I won't name names, but very often, especially with Kairos USA, I have had the good fortune to not be much of an executive director, so I have not built a big organization and gotten tons of funding. Organizations that are more successful in doing that tend to get much more focus on building an organization, rather, and you can, in some ways, can lose sight of the goal, because if you're building your own organization, it's you turn your gaze away from working horizontally. I've seen it with the various church denominations. They don't work with one another. I mean, I'm talking about the grassroots pro-Palestinian church denomination mission committees. I've seen it with the Christian, the national organizations as well. They just get too involved in building their own organizations, hiring that development director, having enough money to do that. Questions: what do you do with the money? And who else is out there that you should be working with the unions, the campuses, the human rights organizations that are working for, you know, to get people fed and housed and have a hospital within 20 miles of where they live. It's all the same struggle. Are we doing that? Are we? Because this is not just about Palestine. It can't be. If it is, well, it doesn't work. And I don't think it has. I don't know how we do this. I think what we do is we build ourselves up. But you've got to have you've got to do a good job communicating. Palestinians are very much struggling with that. Watch for just in a meeting with folks in Bethlehem. I mean, obviously, on Zoom. There's a new Kairos, for those of you who following the Palestinian Christians, in the Kairos movement, there's a new Kairos document coming out. They're working on it. I don't know what they're cooking up. The last one was Cry for Hope. This was 5 years ago. I remember them saying, this is the last time. This is our last cry. If they don't listen to us now, what are we going to do? Well, they didn't. So they're going to cry again. I wonder what that communication is going to be. So Janet put this in the last communication to you folks who are signing up. This is from the General Federation of Trade Unions in Gaza. I'd never heard of them. But we might want to think about this slide. We might want to put this slide up again as well, or make a screenshot of it so you can refer back to while we're talking. It's a good list. It talks about coordinating. I mean, I think it needs to go further, but it's connecting the dots between labor and students, right? I think you can add to the list of who needs to be working together. It probably needs to happen on a local level. You know, for whoever has not thrown up their hands and given up, or like Tim Snyder, broke my heart, you know, leave Yale and escape to Canada and is leaving the country. And everybody's thinking of, well, we're here. What are we going to do within our power and within our own local contexts to try to respond to what's happening to our country? These kinds of lists are very, very important. And I think that's how we need to think. I think this is the last slide until we get to questions. So I started to put together questions. I did the first one, and then I couldn't come up with any others. So I think this is my question to you. Take a minute to look at it. And if anybody cares to speak from your heart and share the answer to these questions, I would love for us all to hear it. And the rest of the questions will be yours. So I'm proud of myself. I actually almost stayed within 45 minutes. I see that we have questions in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing for now.
Well, let's leave that slide up a minute, Mark. I like the slide.
Good.
And if anybody wants to respond to these questions, I'm curious myself. And just go ahead and raise your hand, and Tom will light you up.
I am going to stop to share because otherwise all I see is the slide and I can't see.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, let me just review the slide. Talk about your own work and involvement in this issue over the years. What started you? What has driven you? What and how are you feeling now? And speak from your heart. Okay, so we can stop the share, Mark, so we can see the folks. And Judy McConnell has her hand up. So Judy, we'll get you on live here.
This is so cool to see people. We didn't have a chance to do that last time, so it's nice.
And this is our first shot at this, folks, so just bear with us for a sec. I have asked Judy to unmute. So Judy, if you will unmute. There we go.
And put on your video so we can see you.
Yeah. Judy, click your video. Take the line up.
I don't see a video here.
You know where you do the audio, there's a video camera, and it's got a red line through it. If you click it, it'll.
In the lower left-hand part of your screen.
Yeah.
It's not there. It usually is, but for some reason, let's see if it's anywhere else.
That's all right. Just go ahead.
Let's just go on. Disclaimer, Judy is one of our board members.
Well, I just really like clarification. So excuse me if I didn't get what you heard correctly, but I think I heard you say that Hamas it's not a liberator. And I wanted you to explain that. And then following that, I heard that Hamas is anti-American, and the HSN seeks to stop U.S. support of Israel, and its main purpose is to destroy capitalism. I just don't know what I heard, so I just need clarification. I don't know if Hamas is a good or a bad. I'm just very confused.
I'm sorry if that wasn't clear, Judy. I was quoting directly from Project Esther, from the Heritage Foundation. I was not speaking with my voice. I was saying, this is what they are saying. They are positing the existence of a Hamas support network. They're saying that Hamas wants to destroy America, capitalism, democracy, motherhood, and apple pie. So that's,
I see. So Esther is a heritage group.
That's their propaganda. Yes, that's their.
I didn't get that either.
That's their program. That's their project.
Got it. Okay.
And I echo that, Mark. That I did read the Esther Project. It's incredibly. It's unbelievable, is what it is. Mark cited only a few of their action items, and it's just amazing. So yeah, I encourage everybody to, it's 33 pages long, and it's a pretty quick read if you don't stop and ponder every point. Okay.
You have to read it because they're telling us what they're going to do. It's like Mein Kampf. If you read Mein Kampf, would you vote for Hitler? Well, anyway, of course, he didn't say it was going to destroy Germany, but he did.
Okay, do we have any other live questions? Anybody want to speak to the last slide that Mark showed? And if not, I will first. Start the juices rolling. Well, I will fill in the gap here for a moment. I'm sure there will be questions. Mark, I got started in this whole thing because I owned a tour company, and we used to do tours with Israeli tour planners, Israeli Jewish tour planners. And then I went on one of the tours, and we literally met in the church basement of the Redeemer Lutheran Church in Jerusalem. And I heard the Lutheran pastor, who's always from the Crusader Chapel, they always have a pastor from the West, typically the US. And he talked about all the injustices, and I was like, what? And you had the Jewish side hit at you all of your growing up. We had another side that was very pro-Jewish because they deserved the land and da-da-da-da-da. And to have that come back opposite it was like my head had been shifted on my neck differently. That's how I felt. It was a major shift for me. And that's one reason I do tours. Come and see.
Me too. That's what happened to Karl Barth. That's what happened to Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Yep.
You just froze. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. He'll unfreeze. Oh, now we can't hear you. Uh-oh.
Are you?
There we go. We got
Okay.
you.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I think it's a problem from my end. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, and we can see you moving.
All right. So I'm saying that was a Damascus moment. That was a Karl Barth moment. That was a Dietrich Bonhoeffer moment. All of a sudden, you cannot unsee what you've seen.
Yeah,
And you realize you have a big, big, fat realization.
yeah. By the way, our tour company switched gears and started working with Palestinians. Just to finish that thought. David Benedict has a question. And David, if you'll raise your hand so we can identify you, or just go ahead and unmute yourself and take off the video mute, and you will be able to answer the question.
Hi, David. I would love to see you.
There we go. He's coming.
I think it's with your program. It's not letting you have access to video.
Yeah,
Am I unmuted now?
you are good, but we don't see you yet. Can we see you too?
I don't see any way to make myself visible.
Huh.
Okay. That Zoom is doing that to you, Janet. I'm not quite sure
That's
why.
weird because we did
Yeah.
a test run and you should be able to see a video camera where you can take that off. But let's just keep
You
going.
have to agree to be a panelist. So
Do you have, Janet, maybe you can take a look as there's a drop down that gives you control of that.
Tom just had the answer.
Yeah.
So does David have a question? Agree to be the panelist?
go ahead, David.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on where Mark had left us at the end about our own personal response. And Mark, I really appreciate the outline that you've given, and the complexity of it is overwhelming in terms of my thinking of how do I respond to all of that? Where is my place in all of that? And I have to say, I guess my place is really from my own experience of having, as you know, reached out to the Palestinians through the Tent of Nations. And that's my orientation to all of this. And it causes me to feel and to say that don't we need to see all of this through the eyes of the Palestinians? And what I'm saying by that is that I feel that the genuine response needs to come through groups that are really there and fighting the battle for survival. And that's like people like in Sabeel and the ICAD group, and there are numerous, I think, groups within Bethlehem, the Bethlehem area, that are taking a strong stand. And I just struggle with how can we get behind and be with them in solidarity and support, and how can we get the churches, the people of faith, to be there with them, like through the Churches for Middle East Peace that has a fairly broad backing of denominations and different aspects of the Christian faith. And I just struggle with making that connection and bridging and supporting what the Palestinians are trying to do more directly. So that's my response. How can we do that more directly?
Yeah. Thank you, David. And we go back a little ways. And I've heard you and watched you struggle with these questions, and I struggle with the same questions. Speaking from my heart, for me, it's been one of the great privileges of my life to have been able to meet, and to the extent that I've been able to work with the Palestinians, Palestinian Christians in particular.
Yeah.
And I think it's a mystery, a sacred mystery, how they continue. And it's been a question for me about how to best support them, be with them, help them. I think the fact that we are there is about 110% of what that is. What we actually can do for them, I have no idea what it is. But the fact that we are there, that Janet and in her work and many of the other groups are continuing to visit, and it's picked up again, even these days. There's been it feels like a whole big rush of pent-up demand for people to go there. We have to do that. We have to physically be with them. We have to bring them over here and invite them into Zoom meetings and just embrace them and have them be part of our community and do our best. I mean, you've done that too. You've organized a couple of trips of seminarians. I mean, it's hugely important. It's hugely important. What else, in some ways, what else can we do? So we talk about organizing. We talk about civil disobedience. We talk about boycotts. Yes, we have to do all of that. The fact of those activities, the fact that we're doing them, the fact that we march is important in its own right for its own sake, because it is a kind of communication it's an expression of solidarity. And our poor human efforts and hubris to think that our actions can really make a change, it is hubris. Sometimes it works. And sometimes it works despite the fact that it's working in a way and at a time and with timing that we don't even understand and didn't even plan on. We can't stop. And I often tell myself when I think it's useless and I'm going to stop, I think, well, when the Palestinians say we give up, then I'll give up. I don't know if that addresses what you're saying, David, but you know, Jesus started with 12, he ended up with 12, but it started a movement, and that became a community, and that became an ecclesia, a community, a congregation, and we just have to keep building it and have faith and hope and trust that our efforts will be rewarded as long as we bring our hearts to it.
You're muted. Janet, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I was going to say that young people are catching on to the truth, and I think social media has a lot to do with that. I look at Instagram and the number of messages that are for justice for all versus the narrative. So I think that is a huge shift from when we were growing up and how we got our information and how we learned. So that is a hopeful thing in my estimation. David, where are you from? Where do you live?
I'm up in Middlebury, Vermont.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Thank you, David.
So then my follow-up question would be for Mark, in terms of the 6 people that we have going this coming week to be in solidarity with the Tent of Nations. Once they're there and they're inspired from that experience, how can they connect with something that will have some follow-up, some meaningful, organized way of continuing the support that is needed?
You said, where are the seminarians from, David?
From Union Theological Seminary, but they're not all seminarians. They've now expanded to people from academia as well.
All
There are
right, so can they
3 seminaries.
can they bring this back to their seminaries and to their campuses in some way?
Yeah. I think that's more of a hit or miss thing than bring it back to some organization that has some oversight of the Middle East issues. I think that there are people that have spent a lot of time looking at what's happening in the Middle East, and we have a huge body of people that have been paying attention to it for a long time. And that never seems to get pulled together and focused on how do we follow up.
You know, I would like to think and I'll stick with the story, even if it's not fact-based. I would like to think that the fact that the academy is under the assault that it's under now is that it's a reaction to what you say, that there is more awareness
Mhm.
of what's under threat. There's more awareness of what's really going on. And so the forces that are interested in maintaining the status quo and continuing that program are coming down, trying to stop it. So if they're fighting you, it means you've begun to win. So I would encourage the people who are going with you to realize that they need to bring the struggle back to their own contexts. That they have a mandate, that they have a covenant to do that. You know, I first went to the West Bank, really went to the West Bank with the Fellowship of Reconciliation 20 years ago. And agreeing to go on that trip, I covenanted to go back and speak to my community. The Jewish community would not listen to me, but a significant portion of the churches opened their doors wide, and that was the miracle for me. I don't know what Union is up to. The last thing that the last thing that I heard from Union, because I'm on their mailing list, is that they are sponsoring. You know, they do a lot of work with Barber and with the Poor People's Campaign and other things. They're doing wonderful work. Palestine's not on their agenda. They're staying away from it. Guess what? They're across the street from the Jewish Theological Seminary. That relationship goes way back. That relationship goes back to Abraham Joshua Hessel and Martin Luther King. Heschel was sitting on the stage when King gave his Time to Break Silence talk in 1960. 67. Right. Heschel was standing on the stage. They marched together. That is a deep and close relationship. Union, God help them, like the mainstream church in the United States, has brought into the ecumenical deal. And they will not disrupt that precious relationship of atonement and reconciliation with the Jewish community. That honeymoon that happened starting after World War II.
I think you're right. I think you're right about that.
Yes, I'm very sorry that I am very right about that.
Yeah.
And that's part of the struggle. So these seminarians, these theologians, and these academics that you're traveling with have to go back, and they have to challenge that. They have to have their Karl Barth moment.
I wish we could support churches for Middle East peace. I think that's one instrument that could do something if they could put it together.
Churches for Middle East peace, and you know, they've been around for a long time. They struggle with that.
Yeah.
You know, their constituency and the people who pay their dues and pay their salaries are the mainline churches. Churches for Middle East peace is still working on how to walk that line and to be prophetic. And they do a lot of good education. I know. You get me in a room with May Cannon, I would ask her, May, is this still working? Why? Because it's not. Your churches, your members are still not doing anything.
Yeah.
When do they turn up on Capitol Hill and say, enough? When? So that's my other soapbox, David.
Okay.
You know, I know the CMEP. I've worked with them. It's always been my concern, and I don't know how to change that.
Yeah, I got it. Thanks, Mark.
Well, we've got another hand up. David, thank you so much. And I just want to add, having led many tours to the, we called it the Holy Land, because we were working with churches. I think it's up to the leader to come back and continue to keep a dialogue with her or his group. And I found this time and time and time again. They would do the trip and it was over and life goes on and the way it was before. And so whoever your group leader is, whether it's you or somebody else, I would encourage that person to keep the pressure, if I can use the term. Next hand, who is the next person? I can't
By the
tell.
way, just Janet,
Yep,
there is a question in the chat from somebody named Robert McKay that you should check out. I'd love
okay.
to hear him. And Robert, maybe if you could raise your hand, you could ask that question.
Yeah,
Okay.
Robert, do you want to raise your hand and Tom will unmute you? And what the piece that we're missing, you are asked to be we're going to ask you to be a panelist and just accept that and then we can see you. And David, you can, I think we'll get you off somehow. Not that we, Robert,
Okay.
are you with
And
us?
you were about to recognize somebody, Janet.
I can't do it. Tom is, oh, there's Dave. Well, no, I don't see Tom. What are you looking at? There we go.
There he is.
Robert. And Robert, we're going to ask you to be a panelist. If you will accept, we can see you.
Yeah. Okay. Um,
Yeah, let's just
oh,
go.
oh, oh, okay. I see the video button now.
Okay.
Um,
Robert, where are you from?
I'm Robert May in North Ferrisburg, Vermont. I'm interested in the Constitution and American religion. So
All right, go for it.
those are the two things I gave.
Can you want to ask the question, Robert, please?
Okay, so now I gotta get the.
I see the question here. Do you want me to read it? Is it about
Where's
the
the chat?
ACLU?
Okay. Well, I remember that soon after October 7th, the ADA wrote a letter to American colleges and universities urging them to attack pro-Palestinian groups as material supporters of terrorism. And the ACLU promptly wrote to those same people and said, what you're doing is, what they're urging is clearly unconstitutional. I don't know if it did any good, but
Robert, what's the, this will sound like a stupid question. What's the ADA? What does it stand for?
now I'm having trouble hearing you.
What's
What
the
is the
ADA?
ADA, Robert? Can you
Oh,
define
the
anti-defamation?
Anti-Defamation League.
Oh, ADL.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I miss.
Yeah, the ADL. My dad used to belong to the ADL when they were the good guys. Look, the ADL is part of
The Israel lobby.
It's really part of the Israel lobby, which is really a network. It was a network of organizations that was founded in the early 20th century when all the Jewish immigrants came over, most
Right.
of them, of which I'm a third generation, to protect Jews, to do a couple of things. One is to fight anti-Semitism, which was real and still is real, and to act as kind of social services, support, safety net, philanthropic organizations, etc. And it's still in existence. But it really, since 1948, it really has become a very, very much a sort of a white right wing, very associated with neocons, very associated with this whole new anti-Semitism thing that came out. They authored that book in the 70s. So they are very, very dug in to defending Israel as essential for Jewish survival and is integral to Jewish identity. That's what they do. And they are sticking to their story.
Right.
So I think it's great that the ACLU has come right up against them. I don't think it's necessarily very effective. There are lots of things that the ADL can continue to do that is probably is perfectly constitutional. And so they get pushed back on that in particular. And I think it's great that the ACLU is doing that. And the academy, I think, is the arena where that is happening. I would love to see the churches step out to the extent that they draw that kind of fire from the ADL. I mean, this would be my prayer that they would start to catch that kind of flack, because it means that they're sticking their heads up above, the top of the trench. It's not happening. So that, inshallah, you could see that happening. That would be great.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert and David. And Robert will take you off. And I think we do have another question in the chat. Let's see. We have a comment, education in all caps is the key, such as MEPN, and you are right about that. That's why we do these forums. Rachel, you are up. And
Rachel. Hi.
And Rachel, once we get you up, then just accept the offer to become a panelist, and we'll be able to see you as well by clicking on your video.
Another Minnesotan.
Rachel, are you with us?
Here she comes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tom.
Could be Rachel. Could be Don.
I need to unmute.
Maybe it's Don using Rachel's.
Yeah, go ahead and unmute Rachel and accept the panelist and video yourself. We know this is a little cumbersome thing. Sorry for this, but we're getting through it.
Okay, are we on?
Yep.
Rachel and Don are both here, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
I'd love to
So
see
good
you.
to see you, and thank
You're
you.
not Rachel. It'd be nice to see Rachel.
Well,
She's here.
Good.
Can you accept the panelist and turn on your video?
we accepted the panelists and we turned on our audio, or,
We're on the same screen.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
see
but we're
a
not
line
seeing
through the video. Can you take the line off?
right there.
Okay,
Okay.
gotcha.
Yeah, now we see it.
Okay,
There you are.
Hi, yippee.
Greetings.
Hi.
Greetings, Mark.
It's nice to
Thank
see
you so much for giving us your time today. I wanted to tell you and others something that we're doing in Minnesota to respond to your question that we have passion around. We have an excellent lieutenant governor, Native American woman, Peggy Flanagan. She's announced to run as a Democratic candidate for the U.S. Senate in the next election. Both of us went to one of her first campaign events, and we asked her about her position on Palestinian liberation. And her response was basically, it was an honest response, was that she really wasn't very well up to speed on that issue yet. And so afterwards, I approached her and said, I'd like to help you get up to speed on this issue. And which of your campaign advisors will work with me to do that? And she responded very positively and introduced me to one of her aides, and we have started exchanging information and messages. And it's been a very positive experience, because she's extremely open and wanting to learn and wanting to be a very effective U.S. Senator. So That's a task we've taken on. We're excited about it. And we are inviting other Minnesotans to work with her and her campaign as well.
That's a great story, Don. That's a great story. I'll tell you, one reaction I have is, and I probably don't have to tell you this, sure I don't, that part of your work with her has to be maybe at the get-go to alert her and warn her what she can expect, and that she's walking into a buzzsaw, or choose your metaphor. You say she's Native American. It immediately makes me think of what I've seen happen to African Americans who, like your candidate, being that they're African American, immediately are ready to identify with Palestinians.
Mhm.
And I've watched what's happened to many of them. Either like Cory Booker and what's the name of the guy, Jamal Bowman, they didn't back down, and they were cut down by AIPAC. Or watch what happen. I've watched what happens with others, I won't say their names, who have decided that they wanted to succeed politically, and they have backed off. That's happened with blacks. I mean, I wouldn't say that to her, but I would say I would warn her that she's going to be ready to take a stand, and that'll be a real test.
And we're going to need, in anticipation of that, we need to have her back. We need a lot of Minnesotans to have her back, and we're starting to build that now. But thank you. That's a very important thing to keep in mind.
She may want to work with you tactically and say, you know what? Let's get to where we want to go first. Let's get elected.
Yeah.
Because if she runs on this, she'll be cut down.
Be careful. We got to be careful.
You gotta be careful. You gotta be smart, because they are smart out there, and they have money, and they can do it.
Yeah.
And they are bolder than ever.
If I may too, Betty McCollum is a representative in Congress, and she was one that has been able to walk that very narrow line. So I think it would be good to tie her in somehow with the conversation.
Well, she's our representative, and she has come to our community to speak twice since January 1st. So
you know.
yeah, we know her and we love her.
She also will, Peggy also will have Ilhan Omar as an ally, and
Elizabeth Warren has endorsed her.
yeah.
But
great.
yeah, that's
Let's get her in.
we'll have to be careful. Hey, Mark, I also wanted to say,
don't take any chances.
yeah,
Talk
get
to
her
her
in
about it.
first.
But I would advise her to, for now, because it's kryptonite. It's suicide. It's AIPAC. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I mean,
it's important.
anyway, I'd be very interested to see how things go.
Right. Well,
Thank you for your work.
Mark, I wanted to
folks.
tell you, Mark, I wanted to tell you just a minute. When I had the doors open for me, besides living with Don, who has long been in the Middle East and committed there, but the trip with Interfaith Peace Builders in 2006 was the opening of the door for me, and sitting in the patio of that wonderful East Jerusalem hotel and listening to you give me the history of Zionism in the 19th century. You know, it just opened my mind so wide. And now today with Project Esther, I did read it ahead of time, being a good student, and that's opened my mind too. So thank you so much from my heart.
I remember, Rachel, it was at St. George.
Yes, St. George, right.
They had a little open patio.
Yeah, oh gosh,
And,
that was
I have to tell folks, Don and Rachel led Well, no, you were co-leading with somebody, Don, but Rachel.
I was a participant.
Yeah, that trip in 2006. So we shared that experience, and for me, it was the opening and the beginning of everything. So that what we shared together was precious, and I still have a picture of the three of us standing outside of Tent of Nations. Somebody took the picture, and we were standing, and the hills are in the background. So
Yeah,
that was a precious time, 20 years ago,
yeah,
and we're all still here. Love you, folks.
we are still working. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, do we have another question, Tom? Okay, and we've got one in the Q&A, so let's see here. Myra, would you prefer not to, if you would prefer not to ask the question, I can do it. So I guess I'll go ahead and ask it. This is from Myra, and she says, I recall some time ago Jimmy Carter saying that any member of the US Congress who ever voted to cut funding for Israel would never again win an election. Recently, Tom Friedman wrote an article in the New York Times entitled, This Israeli Government is Not Our Ally. Do you think Tom Friedman has enough influence to change congressional politics on the issue of funding Israel?
Oh, don't get me started on Tom Friedman. But look, um, so, all right, so you're thinking Tom Friedman. You know, there's Tom Friedman, there's Peter Beinart, there's all these very smart, very progressive, very influential Jews who deep down, believe in Israel and believe in the Zionist dream, who for different reasons are seeing that maybe something isn't working quite right about it, but they still want to preserve it. I don't know. I mean, Beinart might deny that. He refuses to call himself an anti-Zionist. He calls himself a non-Zionist or a post-Zionist. I think deep down, he's never said we have to ditch Zionism and we can't have a Jewish state. Anyway, and Friedman, I don't know what to say about him. I think the good news about the Beinarts and the Friedmans and others is that they are openly questioning Israel. They are not defending Israel's actions. They're saying it has to change. And I'll take that.
Yeah.
If in order for funding to stop, or for funding to even be conditioned, and it can work, it happened once in a shining moment during Bush 1, where he had his Secretary of State tell whoever the Prime Minister of Israel was at the time that if they didn't stop building settlements, the check wouldn't come. And I guess it was Sharon, I think, Ariel Sharon. He stopped building settlements. That was meaningless because he started building them right away afterwards, and he just put a pause on it. But it showed that we have the power to change Israel's policies and to change Israel. I think the key has nothing to do with human rights. It has nothing to do with whether there's genocide happening or not. The key has to do with the political calculus. And my model for that, and Ali Abunimah has written about this, is Northern Ireland. Okay? So Jerry Adams and Ian Paisley did not decide if they were going to get married and jump into bed together and disarm and make peace. Because they suddenly realized that, that their cause was lost. They did because the political calculus changed because of the United States of America. and it was in their interest to do that. The South African, the Pretoria government in South Africa did not suddenly decide that apartheid was evil and it was not good. They went to their graves believing that apartheid was a noble endeavor. They went to the table with the ANC because they lost the support of the Thatcher governments and the Reagan governments, and they couldn't function anymore. So the political calculus for them changed. The political calculus has to change for and the United States stopped supporting South Africa. That coincided with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Soviet Union. So our support for South Africa had everything to do with the Cold War. When the Cold War ended, quote, our policy towards South Africa changed because it became in our political interest to do that. That's what happens. These are major global geopolitical events. We have to keep our eyes on that. Things happen that you don't expect. At some point, and who knows, we're talking about Trump. You can't try to figure him out. But all of a sudden, it looks like he's ready to throw Israel and Bibi under the bus. Why? Because he wants to make deals with the Saudis, right? Who knows what that's about? Things happen, and we have to be ready. We have to be ready for that. I don't think Tom Friedman jumping up and down and Peter Beinart making speeches about Palestinian equality is going to change anything about our policies. It's going to happen because of money. It's going to happen because of military contracts. It's going to happen about alliances and geopolitical factors that we have very little control over.
I am looking at the time and we are out of it. I will read a couple comments in the chat and to finish with that. And if anybody else had a question, I apologize for not getting to them. Time is always a factor. There's a group in Des Moines that has worked with Dawood Nassar, and that is Tent of Nations, to produce an interactive children's book about, whoops, and I just lost the rest of the text here. Hold on. A children's book about Tent of Nations Children's Camp. It contains a message and story. Can others help to get the message out through promoting this book? Don and Rachel and David are familiar with it. If you will send to MEPN at MEPN.org information about the book, we'll put it in the follow-up. All right. So we'll do that. And there's a question about how someone can connect with the work with Peggy Flanagan. That is a question again for Don and Rachel. Please, once again, email MEPN at MEPN.org and we'll see how we can make that connection for you.